Welcome to the OHIO podcast. I'm your host, Buckeye Boggs, aka the Podfather, and this is a Jim Tressel's Fingerprints are all over the national championship edition of the OHIO podcast. Do us a big favor and smash that like button. Give us a thumbs up. If you're not already a member of this channel, please consider doing that. Subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. And if you love our content and you want even more of it, that's exclusive to members. It only costs $3.99 a month. You'll get a membership t-shirt after being a member for a month. So many more perks, including free shipping from the store. Head on over to theohiopodcast.com. Click on the store link where you can find exclusive OHIO podcast merchandise and Ohio State merchandise. All right, guys, let's check it out. You all know, those of you who have been to this channel, who have heard me talk, know that I am a huge fan of former Ohio State coach Jim Tressel. The sweater vest is a big part of my fandom. I was in college when Jim Tressel took over as head coach. He changed around everything for Ohio State when it came to the rivalry against that team up north. He won a national championship in 2002 with his second team, second season at Ohio State, and the rest is history, right? Every single player, I don't know of one that doesn't have positive things to say about Jim Tressel when they play for him and obviously move on to the NFL or the rest of their life. They all speak so highly of Jim Tressel, the man, Jim Tressel, the coach, Jim Tressel, the mentor. And earlier in the season, it became evident to me, and I reported that I believed Ryan Day had chosen a new mentor. Of course, early on in the offseason, we knew that Ryan Day's former mentor, Chip Kelly, no longer was going to be in that mentorship role because he was actually working for Ryan Day as his offensive coordinator. And so it made sense that Ryan would need to find somebody, someone who's experienced, someone who's been in that role that he could lean on. And, taking over for Urban Meyer, it felt awkward that Urban would be that guy, especially with some of the things that Urban had gone through previously outside of coaching. But Jim Tressel obviously was that man. Retired after being president of Youngstown State, had just been honored at Ohio State again when they played Youngstown State back in 2023. And obviously, he and Ryan Day knew one another, and it became evident based off of how much Jim Tressel was in and around the program that was a mentorship that Ryan Day was obviously interested in. And now we know, it's been confirmed, yeah, they talk a whole bunch. And some of the things that have gone on this season, I think, are direct results of conversations that Ryan Day has had with Jim Tressel. Now, let's also turn the page and look at who Ohio State's opponent is here in a little over 48 hours from now as we record this video and post it. In Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, former Buckeye Marcus Freeman, former player of Jim Tressel, Marcus Freeman, was a guest on Jim Tressel's podcast late in the offseason, Marcus Freeman. It is obvious that maybe Marcus Freeman is not leaning as heavy on Jim Tressel as Ryan Day is as a mentorship. However, there is zero doubt that Marcus Freeman views Jim Tressel as a mentor of some kind. I have two clips I'm going to show you, or two clips I'm going to play for you, that is. And I want you to listen very close to these because I think it's going to open up some conversation going into this national championship game on just how important Jim Tressel is to these two programs who are facing off Monday night. The first one is about the conversation that Jim Tressel has had with Ryan Day about the approach to the playoffs.
It's something that Ryan and I have been talking about really all year. We grew up in 1AA, which was the playoffs, and you knew if you could get to the end of the season and get in the tournament, that you had a chance. And then you're going to probably have to beat four top 10 teams in a row. And you get into a little bit of a rhythm. And I remember talking to Ryan last week, and he said, I'm starting to get the feel, for this.
There you have it. I mean, evidence that they're talking, right? Spoke to Ryan last week. He's getting a feel for this playoff thing. Of course, obviously, Ryan Day's no dummy. He's never been through the playoffs, college football playoffs. No one has. 4 teams to 12 teams. Ohio State going in as the eighth seed, right? Taking on number 9 Tennessee, then number 1 seeded Oregon, and then I believe it was fourth seeded Texas, and now up next here is the I believe fifth seeded or sixth seed. I can't remember which one's either fifth or sixth. Notre Dame, and so yeah, Jim Tressel has experience in playoffs. He did it when he was the head coach at Youngstown State multiple times, mind you. Multiple times. He won national championships at Youngstown State when Division 1 AA had a playoff. They had an end of season tournament. Division 1 football is the only one that has never had a quote unquote playoffs. We've had the 4-team playoff, but now all of a sudden we expand that and you've got multiple rounds, multiple games, postseason games, and it made sense that Ryan Day would lean heavy on someone who's been there, done that with success. Oh, and he happens to be a Buckeye, right? I mean, it only makes sense that Ryan Day would lean on Jim Tressel for that. And, I think that this is something that a lot of people just haven't really talked about. Why has Ohio State seemed to be able to have so much success in the postseason after going 10-2 in the regular season, losing a 1-point game to Oregon and Eugene, losing a 3-point game against the rival in the last game of the season, and that's revisionist history, and there might be time to go back and revisit and talk about why that happened in the offseason. But first and foremost, we have a national championship game to get to, and more importantly than that, we have a tournament where Ohio State has gone through the playoff successfully and looked completely different than what they did during the regular season. I have two theories, if you will. The first one was that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly brought an NFL approach to this roster, realizing that the regular season is just a means to get to the place you want to get to, which is the college football playoff. It is the end of season tournament. It is the playoffs. What happens during the regular season is a precursor, if you will, or a build-up to just making sure you're one of the top 12 teams when this thing's all said and done and you have a chance to play. That you don't stub your toe like Alabama did, losing to two 6-6 teams in Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, and then have to cry about the fact that you're not one of the top 12 teams, even though you feel you have a roster that is, and then, oh, by the way, lose to the team from Ann Arbor in the postseason. Make sure you're not like that. Make sure that you're not like Ole Miss and everybody says, hey, you're one of the top 12 teams. But again, you lose inexplicable games that cause you to get stuck out. And so even though Ohio State went 2-2, you can say those two losses were by 1 point and 3 points against good football teams. Yeah, you're one of the top 12 teams. You've earned your way in. Now that we're there, how are we going to approach this playoff? And I think Chip Kelly and Ryan Day have slowly been building that way. Now, the other thing that they've been doing, they've been limiting reps in they were limited reps in the spring, they limited reps in the summertime. They were limiting reps for two reasons. Number one, it adds more reps to other guys, second, third string, building that depth in practice. And then number two, you're keeping your guys healthier, making sure that when you get to the end of the season, you are 100% ready to go for these playoffs. And they did that extremely well. Now, I would still argue they need to pull starters quicker in games and rotate more. And we did see more of that in the second half of the regular season than we did the first half. And that's something that I can nitpick on. But you can't argue with the results that here we are going in the national championship game and look at these two rosters. Ohio State, sure, they've got some bumps and bruises, and they've endured a few injuries here and there, especially on the offensive line, but they are relatively healthy. Then you look at Notre Dame. Boy, they are beat up, man. I mean, they are physically beat up. Is that a testament to Ohio State's strength and conditioning? Possibly. Is it a testament to Ohio State's depth? Absolutely. But if you just look at the totality of injuries, I think the approach that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly took in bringing more of an NFL style look to this thing in the offseason in order to make sure you get through the regular season healthy, in order to have a complete roster that's ready to rock and roll come the postseason, absolutely needs to be acknowledged. That's my first theory on that. My second theory on that is obviously the one with Jim Tressel here as his mentor. Jim, when you were at Youngstown State, how did you make sure you did what you did in order to have a roster that was A, healthy enough, and B, emotionally and physically and mentally ready so that when you got to the postseason, you could make a run at it? That is valuable information that Ryan Day, obviously, and Chip Kelly from their NFL, as well as that mentorship he has with Jim Tressel and the experience that Tressel had at Division One AA level doing this in the past. That is invaluable information that Ryan Day, I think, gleaned from in order to have this successful run in the postseason. Now, let's look at Marcus Freeman for an instance. I've got another audio clip that I would like to play for you. This was also asked by Bobby Carpenter on 97.1 The Fan to Jim about his relationship with Marcus Freeman and what it's going to be like for him on Monday during the national championship, watching the school he loves in Ohio State, the school he coached at, the coach who he's mentoring, and Ryan Day going up against a former player of his, and obviously someone he mentors as well in Marcus Freeman. Check out this audio clip.
Yeah, it is difficult. I kind of equate it to, I spent 1 year with Mark D'Antonio in the 80s at Ohio State, and then I spent 5 years with Mark D'Antonio at Youngstown State, and then I spent 3 more years with Mark D'Antonio at Ohio State back in the 2000s, and then all of a sudden we were playing against him, and it was a weird feeling, and it was kind of a feeling like, oh man, now look, I want to win. But man, I can't wait until this game is over. And, I have such a strong feeling for Marcus and Brian. And, think about, we've got Laurinaitis and Hartline and C.J. Barnett and Devin Jordan on that staff. And then I look over on the other sideline, I've got Marcus and Joe Rudolph over there. And I'm thinking, man, I've rooted for those guys all year long. And, shoot, now they're playing each other. And so it is a strange emotion, but.
Interesting, huh? Very interesting that he compares Marcus Freeman at the beginning of that question to D'Antonio, another friend of his, a coaching friend of his, but was also someone that he viewed as a competitor of his when he left and went to Michigan State. And of course, Mark D'Antonio had very successful years, the most successful years for Michigan State football in my lifetime, anyways. And Jim Tressel kind of compares Marcus Freeman to that a little bit. I think that he views Marcus in very similar light. This is someone who I admire. This is someone who I appreciate. But going into this game, this isn't someone who I want to see win necessarily. I think if Notre Dame were to pull off the upset, I think Jim Tressel would be incredibly happy for Marcus Freeman. But his Buckeye heart and Buckeye soul would be crushed a little bit. I think that's kind of the approach that he's taking to this a little bit. And quite honestly, I think Ohio State fans, if they can look at it through that light, unlike my co-host Chris Wilds, who despises Marcus Freeman, I do not. I think Marcus Freeman is an incredibly good human being. I watched the hour-plus interview that he had with Jim Tressel on his podcast late in the offseason before the season got kicked off, and Marcus Freeman came off as an incredibly likable human being. Has he said a few things that have rubbed Ohio State fans the wrong way? Sure, but he's not. I wouldn't expect him to just go into the Notre Dame job and just praise the Scarlet and Gray left and right. He's not. He's not here. He's not the head coach of Ohio State. There's not a block O emblem on his jackets or on his coaching shirt. Okay, he doesn't wear Ohio State clothes when he goes into the practice facility there in South Bend. All right, he's wearing Notre Dame stuff, so I wouldn't expect him to say glowing things about Ohio State because he's not here. But I can at least take when I take off my scarlet and gray glasses and I look at it through the prism of a former Buckeye who's succeeding. I can take some pride in that. I can take some um, some pleasure in the fact that Marcus Freeman is far and away probably the most successful former player at Ohio State in the coaching realm today and possibly ever. Possibly. Um, Obviously, Earl Bruce was incredibly successful, but Earl Bruce never coached for a national championship as a head coach. Marcus Freeman is. The fact that in 3 years, Marcus Freeman took a Notre Dame program that um, at the time felt um, felt a little bit beat up from the Kelly years, and in 3 years has completely given that fan base hope, has injected a ton of enthusiasm in that program, and now they sit on the precipice of taking down Ohio State and winning a national championship. So yeah, I can look at that through eyes as a Buckeye fan to a former player, but now that you're playing against us, of course I want to win this game. Of course I want to beat you. And I think Jim Tressel can separate those two things very nicely, and we as Ohio State fans should take some lessons from that and looking at it that way as well. But there is zero doubt that Marcus Freeman and the ability, the way he's built the Indiana program last 3 years looks a lot like how Jim Tressel built Ohio State so quickly. They play solid, incredibly disciplined defense. They will beat you in special teams. They are not going to get outplayed in special teams. They're creative in special teams. They know how to flip the field. They're disciplined there. And they play intelligent offense. They're going to run the football. They're going to shorten the game. They're going to make you beat yourself because they're not going to make mistakes. And so that is Jim Tressel ball 101. Does it mean that you get to blow out every opponent? No, it's not that. But what it is it means you get to stay in every single game and you give yourself a chance no matter who your opponent is. And so when I look at this Notre Dame team, I see Jim Tressel. Look, I have compared this Notre Dame team to 2002 Ohio State. They are coming into this game. They are the underdog. They don't have the same roster as Ohio State. Ohio State is the 2002 Miami Hurricanes, and we all know how that game ended. It ended with us hoisting the trophy and celebrating a national championship there in Arizona and slaying the college football giant that was Miami at the time. And and how did we do that? Through the exact formula Marcus Freeman is using to succeed as head coach at Notre Dame. So I am not shocked at all that Marcus Freeman has built the team the way he has because it is how Jim Tressel built his team, and that's who Marcus Freeman knew. Luke Fickell, who I think Marcus Freeman also would say is a good friend of his and a mentor of his, at least on the defensive side of the ball. Luke Fickell learned a lot from Jim Tressel. When you listen to Luke Fickell talk, he talks about Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer and how he learned so much from both of those two guys, who are incredibly opposite people, by the way. I don't think anybody would compare Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel as far as their coaching style, their demeanor, their approach. It is all very, very different, yet they are both extremely successful. And so when Luke Fickell gleans from both of those guys and passes down that knowledge he has as a coach to Marcus Freeman, I think it's pretty easy to get to the point where you understand that Marcus Freeman has some of those Tressel tendencies. And so when I say that Jim Tressel's fingerprints are all over this national championship game, look at the styles of play. Look at how the coaches talk. All right. Look at how the relationships they have with their players. That is very Tressel like, man. Even in this era of NIL, transfer portal, me first player, where Jim Tressel didn't have to deal with that when he was head coach. These two coaches, in Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman, have tremendous relationships that they have built with their players. And that, I think, is very similar to what Jim Tressel was able to do in building the culture that he had at his programs. Let's take the faith aspect to this. Jim Tressel has never been shy sharing his faith and allowing players to express their faith and explore their faith under his leadership. And here you have Ryan Day, who although he doesn't come right out and say publicly that he's a Christian or he's a follower of the Christian faith, it is evident he is allowing his players to explore their faith and verbalize their faith on a platform that they have been given as football players at Ohio State. Very Jim Tressel like, mind you. And I'll say this, the further we've gotten away from Urban Meyer, the more Ryan Day and his approach with the players in that aspect feels more like Jim Tressel. And I don't think that is a mistake. Again, I believe Ryan Day has leaned on Jim Tressel for the last year extremely heavy, and it's no mistake that that faith aspect of this team has just blossomed this year. I think that is directly from the mentorship of Jim Tressel to Ryan Day to the players. Now, it is obvious that the faith aspect is a huge portion of the Notre Dame program. Well before Marcus Freeman was ever a head coach at Notre Dame, the faith aspect of the Catholic faith, the Catholic faith, is a huge part of Notre Dame. It's a huge part of their culture as a football program, their school, obviously, and the fan base. So many Catholic people in and around my life here in Ohio they fly their Notre Dame flags because that is more important to them than the state they live in. Okay, my faith is also more important to me than anything else, but I happen to be born and raised a Buckeye and I'm not Catholic. However, you understand the relationship between those two things. And I think Marcus Freeman leaning heavy into the Catholic faith, the Catholic culture as head coach of Notre Dame, again, something that Jim Tressel obviously expressed to his players. And if you go back and you watch that interview with Marcus Freeman and Jim Tressel under Jim Tressel's podcast, you will see Marcus Freeman and Jim Tressel talk about that very thing. Marcus Freeman has always been a man of faith. Tressel talked about when he was a player, he was a captain at Ohio State. He mentioned that the two greatest things he had was his mother's work ethic, that she was his hero, and his faith, and how family and faith are important to him. The most important things to him before even football. You look at Marcus Freeman, his wife, his beautiful family, all those children, his way he's leaned heavy into the Catholic faith at Notre Dame. It is evident that it is faith and family in football for Marcus Freeman. Again, very similar to Jim Tressel. So looking at it all big picture here in conclusion, I couldn't be happier for Jim Tressel. As a Jim Tressel fan, seeing all these different fingerprints on these two programs in this national championship game, I would love to be a fly on the wall during the national championship game and just kind of watch Jim Tressel sit back with pride in his eyes and watch these two programs who've made it to the pinnacle of college football in the first year ever of the college football playoff, the 12-team playoff, these two programs that probably feel like he's had some influence on Notre Dame through Marcus Freeman and a giant influence in his mentorship to Ryan Day this year, reach the pinnacle, the biggest game of the year in college football. I would love to be a fly on the wall and watch Jim Tressel watch this game. And so, in conclusion, thank you, Jim Tressel, for being the man you are, not only for Buckeye Nation, but for everybody who looks at you and the way you have approached faith, family, and football. That should be honored in this national championship game. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Did I miss anything that you think should be mentioned about Jim Tressel in this game? I'd love to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts about Jim Tressel. Are you a Notre Dame fan? Let me know in the comment section below what you think of Sweater Vest, as we call him around here in Ohio, as the national championship game prepares to be played. Like I said, in just about 48 hours from now, depending on when you watch this video. All right, guys, remember, be kind to one another. I owe someone's OH in Carmen, Ohio with all your heart. Till next time, go Bucks.